So with this checked in here and the angle of the camera fixed, should be able to loosen this enough that I can then take it out of the vise. And when you do this stuff, oil will tend to come out. Of course, before you take your forks apart, you always want to check your baseline settings. In this case, on my very non-standard application, I was running 9 clicks out from fully closed on the compression and 14 out on Rebound. Okay, so with that done, you're now at a point where, well, oil is going to drip out because it's forked and it's full of oil. You'll also see the oil's really nasty in these. It should not be dark like that. They've gone too long without service. So, spring, you got a little isolator washer here to spread the load. On these, I think these are from a 97. I think the 98s just have 2 flats on the cap. And I don't know that they have this spacer here. This is just a spring spacer. When you open these up, there's a lot to look at, and it's kind of hard to tell what you need to do to take them apart. Most people want to go after these 2 flats. Don't do that. Those are Loctited together. You really don't ever need to take that apart, has at least been my experience. So, with that being said, what I typically do is I will go dump this out. So you get all the oil out of the outer chamber of the fork. This is a twin chamber fork, so you'll only get about 1/3 of the oil out. The rest is inside the damping cartridge. And you can always expect things like this to make a mess. That is just the nature of the beast. I have yet to find a way around it. So, with that done, the next piece of the puzzle is, if I can do this without spilling the remaining oil everywhere. There's a nut on the bottom. So you want to loosen that nut. That nut will not come out all the way. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the guts out of the fork so then you can take the rest of it apart. This is controversial. Impact guns do work well for this. You don't ever want to use one to tighten it, really. But loosening, I've found an impact just does a good job getting it apart without spinning internal bits that are just kind of held in place by friction. Of course, make sure all your forks are clean before you do this. Grinding dirt into stuff, spinning it is never good. And there it is, straight back in the oil. And I'll clean the rest of that mess up later. That went everywhere. Okay, so that loose, now you'll notice it's still not free. You just kind of keep unthreading this and eventually hear that click. So what's happening is this is what that bolt looks like. You've now unthreaded the outer threads and there's a single lead on this. So every time it unscrews past the end of the lead, it pops back in. So you're just on that last thread. So with it at that point, you now can, if you push on the spring, you can actually push this past the end of the fork. And what you need to do is unthread this from the inner nut. What you'll end up seeing, and I can't get the camera down there to show you, is when you look inside there, when you're pushing on the top of the fork, it's going to look like this. And what you have to do is get your 14mm open end on this. Do it square. If you're cocked, it'll tear the threads up on the Rebound adjuster. So get your wrench on that, and then you're going to unthread this. It should basically just be snug. Has been my experience with how these normally come apart. So I'm going to try to fight with this one, see if we can't get it to come loose. You can push this out that far, and you can see I've got a hold of it, and it's actually holding it out. You can see what this looks like. There's a little bit of crap in those threads. So with that all the way out, man, this oil just gets everywhere. I'm just going to pop this loose. Easier said than done, apparently. There we go. So it's now loose. And with it loose, I don't have to worry about all the torque, so I can use my third hand here and start to unthread this. Sometimes it'll unthread on its own. If you push it sideways against the guts of the fork, that can help. Mine has gotten to a place where it doesn't want to really go any further. Okay. And just like that, your rebound nut is out. Yeah, it takes a little bit of doing. That's a lot easier to do than other person. So, still recording. Good. So, that's your rebound adjuster. Wipe it all off, make sure it looks okay. These things don't have dust caps out over them on the bottom, so they get kind of nasty. So, we'll put that in the other one. They are the same left to right. In fact, most of the stuff about these forks is the same left to right. If this rebound adjuster comes out at the same time, you can go ahead and pull that out, wipe it down. There really should not be any oil on this, or at least not much. If there's oil in this inner section, it usually means that one of these seals, there's seals inside here, they're starting to leak. Most of these forks are old enough that they just do that by now. There may be a performance implication to that, but I'm not sure what it is. The main thing you don't want is you don't want water to get in there, because if water gets in there, it starts rusting the spring that pushes the rebound needle into the seat, and rust is bad, right? It destroys everything. Stuff gets stuck, seized up. Usually the O-rings that leak are water, at least, or on the adjuster end. And if you're getting oil in there, usually it's on the needle end. There's usually an O-ring in there. So that one's leaking. The other one of these forks was not. Okay, so with the nut off the bottom, and this is where people get confused with these, you assemble them kind of upside down because they are conventional forks, upside down compared to what people are used to today. Now you can pull the whole cartridge assembly out, which I didn't really leave myself enough room to do. So this, again, we'll just wipe her down, taking a look at everything, make sure it's all good, seems to be. We'll take that washer off, we'll take the spring spacer off, put that with the other ones. Again, we'll just wipe this down enough so it's not dripping. This is the part that does the damping. And this is what that nut threaded onto in the bottom. So as soon as that adjuster is unthreaded from this, you can pull it all out. It frees the spring up. With this out, this is what does all your damping. This does all the work. And if you can hear it making, I guess, bubbly noises while you're doing this, that is how you know there is still air in it. You don't want air inside your damper assembly. So that is that. We'll open that up and empty it out in a minute. First we will deal with this. So we'll pull the spring out. It's going to bring some oil out with it. We'll let that drain. The springs are, again, a little shorter than what these forks typically use, since these are shortened 4.5 inches. Okay, so with that out, you now have just the outer assembly. You can see this all moves fine. This is the one that has the dent in it, because right there it gets stuck and then it goes again. So that's one thing that you always want to check, because these hang down below the axle. They're a little more vulnerable. I would never have thought of it. They can get dented. So then what you do is take a screwdriver and you'll pop your dust seal out. Pretty easy, just like if you were cleaning a seal saver or something. So that'll come up and out. And then the next step is there's a little snap ring in here. It's very, very easy to get out. You just find the open end of it, stick that same screwdriver in, and drag it out. Be careful not to get the chrome on the fork tube with your screwdriver. It would take a bit of a scrape to actually hurt it, but still good to be careful. Parts for these aren't dime a dozen anymore. I don't even know if you can get this stuff new. So from there, this is where you're going to yank on this thing, use it as a slide hammer to get the remaining seal out, your actual oil seal. So it takes a pretty good hit. You'll see everything on the table's moving, which is what you want. And there you go. So when that comes out, again, you get another burst of oil that inadvertently or invariably will go on your foot. This is the spring guide right here. That came out just because I didn't flip the fork upside down and drop it out after I pulled the spring out. Sorry, spring guide's not really accurate for this. It's really just takes up space, big spacer. So get that out, wipe it off a little bit. We'll stack it back there with the other one. And then you have your stack up of bushings and the other seal. So on these, I always like to run this stuff off the top because the lower fork bushing, that's a problem. The lower fork bushing, the edges on this are very sharp. So if you run these off the top, you're not going to tear them up quite so bad if you intend to reuse them for some reason. Note the location of this backup ring is directly below the oil seal and directly above this bushing. And that's why you can hammer on it like that and it'll all come apart. So sometimes this bushing will kind of stay in there, but then when you pull the fork the rest of the way out, it'll pop it out because the lower, it can't go past the lower. So again, I run these off the top and we'll inspect those. Keep that one separate for now. And another requisite wipe down. So one thing that you see on this one, and this is the dent that I was mentioning. So you've got this coating on these bushings. It's totally worn out. Like normally these are worn out and they don't even look worn out because they kind of trap metal particles and they turn into sandpaper even though they look good. This one is actually damaged and past due. And the only reason for it is likely because that tube is dented where it was hanging up. So that's definitely trash. The tube is trash, and in this case, or the tube is trash, the slider is also trash because of that dent. So I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but there's a line where the chrome is lifting, and that's what this thing was eating seals, and that's why. So this one going in the trash. So got that out. Of course, the the bottom of this is still got some bits in it. Specifically, that cap, this piece is still in the bottom, and then on the inside, this piece is still sitting in there. So that's the only thing I haven't pulled out of that slider. All I'm going to do, and it's just not going to show up on camera, to get this out, I'm just going to take a large pair of pliers, grab this on the outside, and just rotate it, pull it out, and it'll just pop right out. So that's super easy. I just don't have the tool sitting here to do it right now. So that's that. And that means the only real remaining thing is pulling that cartridge apart, which I will show here really quick. So buy one of these from Racetech or someone else that's got the different rod sizes in it, so you can actually clamp and hold them without damaging the chrome. Some forks have a design that you don't need these. These do not. You really have to have this tool. Again, these are 10mm shafts, which is a little bit strange. So if you're working on these, make sure you get the right size before you get it all torn apart and end up facing that crushing disappointment of not having the right tool. So this nut has to come off to allow the rod to slide out through the top of your cartridge. The other thing that needs to happen is the whole base valve assembly. This piece needs to come out. You can see that just unscrews. So what I'm going to do, and I jumped the gun putting that in there, I'm going to chuck this lightly in the vise. This is all aluminum. You don't want to crush any of this stuff. You definitely don't want to grab any of this. This is really thin. So I'm going to grab this lightly with a vise, and then I'll take my socket and unscrew this cap, and we'll pull this whole thing out. There we go. That's actually quite a lot tighter than it needs to be. Some of these, possibly all of them, would have originally left the factory with Loctite. So if you have one that is, this one actually might be original. I don't know what's wrong with that one. That one's been chewed up and looks really bad. So I'll show that in a minute. It does have Loctite on it though. So we'll pull that assembly out. This is full of oil still. This doesn't drain out when you do the rest. So wiping this down, looking for any damage, which there actually is. That's really odd to see. This bushing on the compensation piston looks pretty good. That seal's squared off, but it looks good. This did not have air in it when I checked it before I pulled it apart. So that's also a good sign that the seals are all good. If it has air in it and it's making that crunchy noise, or if it has dead spots and damping, you know that you have some seals going bad. Otherwise, you can usually get away without replacing them on these. So that's base valve, or really compression valve number 2. Now you have a cartridge that is full of oil. You really need to have, so you want the needle in there to be open. It naturally springs open on its own. So if for some reason something's sticking and you can't tell, you can put this in, run it back up into its normal position and push on it and try to depress that valve. If it feels like it's stuck, you might, that tells you you need to service that part. So this one's not stuck, which means you can pump the oil out. So I'll dump this out. You want to cycle the rod to push all the remaining oil out the bottom. You got that in there. It really doesn't take much for these. You just snug it up. I know you can't tell what snug is on the camera, but it's not much. And actually that one wasn't even tight. So unthread that. And just a little nut with a weird shape to it. That shaft is a little sad looking. That looks like someone's had it apart before and didn't have the right jaws, where it's all gouged. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I don't really want to run it past that seal head. This is the seal head right here, but there's no choice really. So now that the nut's off, you can run this back and through. And, ooh, that's metal. So something's been wearing. That's always good. That dark color is, yeah, it's something is metallic is wearing. Usually it's the aluminum because the chrome surface on these is pretty durable. You can see this is the spacer right here. This is the spacer that shortens these. So I shortened the extension side using a 4.5 inch rather piece of PVC. I did put a couple O-rings in it so that it doesn't rattle last time I was in here. So that'll come out. It'll leave the O-rings behind. Of course, I'm dripping oil everywhere just because that's how suspension projects go, at least for a home gamer like myself. I'm sure if I was doing this every day, if I was a real pro, I'd have a nice steel workbench. Everything would be perfectly clean, and I'd have done this enough times to know all the tricks. And, well, I haven't. I've had these forks apart once before, and it was like 2 years ago, and I really don't remember it, to be honest. So I'll have to figure out if I can see what the source of that wear is. It might just be because this one is the one that's not round. There is some fluid cycling that happens where oil gets pulled past the seals by the rod. So it may have just pulled that aluminum in from this wearing. That's my guess, because none of this looks bad. The piston band looks good. The shims are all, these are the shims that do the damping. You want to make sure they're not warped or bent. These all look good, which is great news considering these are on a 400-pound bike and not the factory 250, 260-pound two-stroke bike. So that's how you take apart the Showa 49mm conventional closed chamber 1996 to 1998 RM125 RM250 forks. There are some minor differences depending on what year you have, but in general, that's the theory behind it. So hope that helps somebody out, and hope next time I do this 3 years from now, it'll help me remember how the heck to do it.